The Morandi Bridge, officially named the Polsevera Viaduct, was inaugurated on September 4, 1967. It stood as a symbol of Italian engineering prowess and 1960s innovation, expected to last at least 50 years. Yet, it barely reached its designated lifespan. On the morning of August 14, 2018, disaster struck at 11:36 a.m. when a 210-meter segment of the bridge catastrophically failed. Vehicles plunged 45 meters to the ground, resulting in the tragic loss of 43 lives. The initial shock and sorrow soon turned to fury, as it emerged that this disaster was not entirely unforeseen. Warnings about the bridge's instability had been circulating for years. The 1960s were a vibrant time for Italy. The shadow of World War II was receding, Italian design was celebrated worldwide, and living standards were on the rise. The era also saw many Italians owning their first cars, which in turn spurred the demand for more roads and infrastructure. This need was particularly acute in Genoa, where the city was divided by the Polsevera Valley. A bid was launched for a new bridge to connect the two parts of the city and link the bustling A7 and A10 highways. The proposal that won was by Riccardo Morandi, an Italian engineer famed for his pioneering work with prestressed concrete. His design utilized considerably more concrete and less steel, a choice driven by the steel shortages in Italy during the early 1960s due to post-war restrictions. This made Morandi's design both appealing and cost-effective. Construction spanned from 1963 to 1967, and the bridge was officially opened on September 4, 1967, by President Giuseppe Saragat. The structure featured a lengthy stretch of elevated road supported by inverted concrete trestles and sections with longer spans to traverse the valley below, which was filled with industrial buildings, modest homes, railways, and a river. Particularly challenging were sections 9, 10, and 11 of the Polsevera Viaduct, both in terms of design and maintenance. To manage these long spans, Morandi used a distinctive blend of brutalist design, incorporating cantilevers from the concrete trestles below and cable stays from above, anchored to 90-meter towers. These cable stays were the most innovative part of the design, consisting of clusters of steel cables encased in prestressed concrete sleeves. The Italian press celebrated the new bridge enthusiastically. La Stampa newspaper praised its durability, claiming, "The bridge won't need any maintenance, neither will its stay cables, which are shielded from the elements by their concrete casing." An engineering website I visited offered this explanation of the stays. The concrete stays were made by encasing prestressing tendons within a thick concrete beam to protect against corrosion. The stays were then post-tensioned, keeping them compressed. As someone who isn't an engineer, this description doesn't clear up much for me. Even to a layperson, a few aspects of this design are notably concerning. First, the cables are all grouped into a single stay. If this single component fails, there's no secondary system to fall back on, no fail-safe. Second, the cables are encased within the concrete, making it impossible to visually inspect them for any corrosion. Concrete is undeniably strong and stable when used in the right conditions, but bridges like the Morandi Bridge face constant stress from traffic vibrations. They also expand and contract due to temperature changes and suffer from corrosion due to salty sea air and emissions from nearby factories. Over time, these factors can cause the concrete to crack, exposing the steel within to the elements and accelerating corrosion. This can drastically reduce a bridge's longevity. For instance, take a look at this photograph of another of Morandi's bridges. You can clearly see how such conditions could severely shorten a bridge's lifespan. The Genoa Bridge, soon after its inauguration, revealed the urgent need for extensive maintenance. Within just 5 years, parts of the steel deck abutments were severely corroded and had to be replaced with stainless steel. Even Riccardo Morandi, the bridge's designer, expressed concerns in a 1979 report about the escalating traffic loads and the corrosive effects of sea air mixed with acidic emissions from a nearby steel mill. These conditions were deteriorating the bridge much faster than anticipated. Morandi recommended regular maintenance to seal any cracks and exposed areas with epoxy resin, and proposed that the bridge be covered with a thick, rubberized paint to shield it from the elements. By the early 1990s, Italy was experiencing a financial downturn. In an effort to generate funds, the government decided to privatize some public assets, including the Morandi Bridge, which was sold off as part of a concession to manage the nation's toll roads. The winning bid came from a company partly owned by the billionaire Benetton family, who also held a controlling interest in Atlantia. Atlantia owned SPE Engineering, the firm responsible for bridge inspections across Italy. This created a potential conflict of interest. The Benettons not only owned the bridge but also had a majority stake in the company tasked with its inspection and maintenance. This arrangement raised significant concerns about the safety and oversight of the bridge, particularly for the citizens of Genoa who relied on it daily. Maintenance efforts were sporadically made as the corrosion damage to the upper parts of the stays became undeniable. Notably, on Tower 11, inspections revealed that about 30% of the cables had corroded away. In response, during the 1990s, both Towers 10 and 11 underwent remedial work which included the addition of extra cables and new steel sheathing, intended to alleviate stress on the original concrete stays. Strikingly, Tower 9, the one that would ultimately collapse in 2018, received no such repairs. The reasons for this omission remain unclear. Instead, monitoring systems were installed on the spans. These devices, essentially listening to the sounds of the rusting cables, were supposed to detect signs of strain loss within the concrete sleeves. As the 2010s progressed, the urgency to either replace or significantly repair the Morandi Bridge intensified. Despite these growing concerns, calls for action were consistently ignored or dismissed. In 2012, a local businessman ominously warned, "When that bridge falls down in a few years, we will all remember those who said no to repairing it." Alarming images that surfaced, showing what appeared to be rusty cables protruding from the deteriorating structure, still failed to spur governmental action. Ministers at the time optimistically claimed the bridge could last another 50 years, dismissing any concerns about its stability as mere fiction. Tragically, their assessments proved to be gravely mistaken. By April 2018, the company responsible for maintaining the Morandi Bridge had finally issued a tender for the necessary repairs, but it was tragically too late. On August 11 at 11:36 a.m., during a severe thunderstorm, Section 9 of the bridge catastrophically failed. Vehicles were sent plummeting 45 meters to the valley floor, where they were subsequently crushed by the collapsing concrete tower and support trestles. Video footage capturing the disaster showed the cable span suddenly slackening and breaking apart, followed by the collapse of the roadway and the massive 90-meter support tower. The collapse resulted in the deaths of 43 people, with many more injured, yet the consequences could have been even more severe. Fortunately, it was a public holiday, meaning most of the warehouses below the bridge were empty. Additionally, the modular design of the bridge meant that only Section 9 failed, while spans 10 and 11, which hovered over residential blocks, remained intact. In the immediate aftermath, a 12-month state of emergency was declared in the Genoa district, and over 600 residents living under the bridge were evacuated due to fears of further collapse. Theories about the cause of the disaster ranged from a direct lightning strike during the storm to the cumulative effects of excessive traffic and high winds. The bridge's owners, the Benetton family, initially remained silent. It took them 48 hours to issue a statement, which simply expressed condolences to the victims' families. When questioned about their delayed response, family patriarch Gilberto Langley explained that their silence was intended as a mark of respect. The Italian public was incensed. Over the years, as road tolls climbed higher, there was a growing perception that the Benettons were profiting at the expense of infrastructure upkeep, a responsibility they were supposed to fulfill. To many, Benetton's reputation as a compassionate and caring brand seemed to be merely a facade, a notion that was significantly discredited following the collapse of the Morandi Bridge. While the full investigation into the bridge's collapse is ongoing, available information has pointed to neglect in maintenance as a critical factor. Currently, 59 individuals are facing trial, accused of not maintaining the bridge adequately. It has been revealed that inspections were sometimes conducted from a distance, with officials merely observing the structure through binoculars rather than performing close-up, thorough inspections on the bridge itself. Just days before the tragedy, a significant crack was reported on the bridge's surface, and simultaneously, road crews were adding heavy concrete jersey barriers, further stressing the already strained cable stays. Ultimately, this proved too much for the structure to withstand. The Morandi Bridge's failure was a result of a flawed design, years of insufficient maintenance, and a management approach that prioritized profits over safety, culminating in a disaster that many had feared and foreseen. Deciding what to do with the remnants of the Polsevera viaduct was a subject of debate, as some advocated for preserving the remains for historical significance. However, the decision was ultimately made to demolish the remaining parts of the bridge through a controlled explosion in June 2019. Interestingly, Riccardo Morandi, the bridge's original designer, passed away in 1989 and thus did not live to see the failure of his landmark design. The design used in the Morandi Bridge, featuring concrete-encased cable stays, was replicated in about half a dozen other bridges. Notably, at least 2 other Morandi bridges have experienced structural issues. Both the Wadi El Kuf Bridge in Libya and the Rafael Urdaneta Bridge in Venezuela have been reported as nearing collapse at various times in their existence. Therefore, if your travels ever take you over an aging concrete Morandi bridge, my advice would be straightforward: don't linger, accelerate, and make it to the other side as quickly as possible.